Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Special Education Legal Fund's April webinar. My name is Christine Lai, and I'm the Executive Director and co-founder of Special Education Legal Fund. Thank you for joining us this evening. Before we begin, I'd like to thank our featured sponsor for tonight's webinar broadcast, that is Fusion Academy, our friends at Fusion in Greenwich, Fairfield, and White Plains. We're very, very pleased to have their support. I'd also like to send a special acknowledgement to the rest of our corporate sponsors. Their generous support makes this webinar program, as well as so much else of what we do, possible. At the platinum level, I'd like to acknowledge WealthSpire Advisors. At the gold level, our friends at Winston Preparatory School. At the silver level, our friends at Fusion Academy, as I said, Villa Maria School, Eagle Hill School, American School for the Deaf, and Chapel Haven Schliefer Center. And finally, we are grateful to the Pinnacle School and the Spire School at our bronze level sponsors. So thank you so much to everyone. Before we begin, I'd like to share a little bit about Special Education Legal Fund for those of you who are not familiar with us. Special Education Legal Fund was founded in 2018 to provide resources, knowledge, and support to families in need with children in the special education system. Since 2018, in the past 6 years, actually, it's this month, believe it or not, in this month, we will actually cross over the $1 million mark. We will have given $1 million in grants since 2018 to hundreds of families in school districts across Connecticut and Westchester County, New York. And that is, I think, the first time I've said that in public. So there we go. We do this primarily, we provide support for families primarily through two programs, the Legal Assistance Program and the Advocacy Support Program, both of which are currently accepting applications for the May application cycle. The Legal Assistance Program is the attorney program, and it provides families in need with $6,000 in legal support from a qualified special education attorney. The Advocacy Support Program provides, you guessed it, advocacy support of $1,000 from a qualified non-attorney advocate. And for more information or to start the process with a pre-screen, please visit our website. It's spedlegalfund.org, and you click on the button that says apply for a grant. This process is a 4-step process. The pre-screen, as I mentioned, is done on the website. After you have completed the pre-screen, you will receive an application via email. You fill this out, send in your IEP, and you will be contacted for an interview. After you complete the interview, we will notify all families as to the status of their grant by the end of the month in which they apply. Again, for more information, please visit our website. Next, tomorrow, actually, tomorrow is our next, our most recent, our upcoming school showcase with the Spire School in Stamford. We're really excited to visit our friends at the Spire School because they have a really, really interesting and innovative program around supporting students with anxiety, depression, and school refusal. So please join us tomorrow, Thursday, April 25th at noon. This is a really in-depth and insightful look into what makes Spire School tick and what kind of students will thrive there. So please join us. You can register for that via Eventbrite, the same link that you've accessed to register for this webinar. And next month, this is brand new today, actually, our May evening webinar will be on bullying, special education, and the law. I'm really excited about this one. It's been a topic that, is really relevant for a lot of families, and really excited to have the experts on this panel, Jeff Forte, attorney Jeff Forte from the Forte Law Group, Steve Hernandez from ConCan, executive director, and our good friend Andy Feinstein from Feinstein Education Law Group. They're all going to be on board to talk to us about bullying, what it means, what to do, and how the law protects you. Finally, after all that, we are incredibly pleased to welcome Marion Walsh back to the panel this evening. This is Marion's, I think, 4th panel with us. She's a fixture on our WealthSpire Advisor Special Needs Planning webinar, and she's also appeared and lent her expertise to last year's Preparing for College webinar. Marion is a distinguished special education attorney with over 20 years of experience, and her commitment to students with disabilities, particularly those challenged by mental health issues, runs deep through both her professional and her personal life. So thank you for joining us this evening, Marion. Next up, and now like a real repeat guest on our series is Stephanie Zabar. We are really excited to welcome Stephanie back. It is her first year, well, she's finishing up actually her first year, I should stop saying that, as head of school at Winston Prep's Connecticut campus. But this is her 20th year as part of the Winston family. She has been, really a fixture at Winston, Connecticut since the very beginning. And we have been very pleased to know Steph for a great many years personally, and we're very pleased to have her on the panel today for her, I think, third appearance, something like that. And finally, last but certainly not least, I am so excited to welcome Danielle Meyer from the Harvey School to the panel. This is Danielle's first appearance on a self panel, and I'm absolutely thrilled for her to be here. I have had occasion to know Danielle's skills firsthand through my kids, both of whom attended Harvey. And Danielle is an absolute rock star in the accommodations process and knows absolutely everything about that. So we've been thrilled to have Danielle on both, supporting us as a family and on this webinar this evening. So welcome, Danielle. Finally, because this wouldn't be a webinar without a disclaimer, this webinar panel is presented for informational purposes only. This webinar is intended as a resource for families who are navigating the special education system in Connecticut or New York and is not intended to provide legal support, advice, or assistance to any particular individual, nor is it intended to replace the advice and counsel of a qualified special education attorney. This webinar should not be construed as an endorsement by Special Education Legal Fund or any of its representatives of any of the participating attorneys, professionals, or educators in the panel. For webinar participants, this panel should be viewed as a public forum. Please do not ask questions via the Zoom platform, either in the Q&A or the chat, about your child or your child's legal or educational situation. Please refrain from any comments that include identifiable information about your child, including name, grade, school, or school district. Please remember that your screen name could be visible to the participants of this panel, the panelists, and Special Education Legal Fund. This webinar is being recorded and may be shown or distributed at a later date at the discretion of Special Education Legal Fund. So that was a bit of a mouthful. Welcome, everyone. So, I'm really excited to have this, to touch on this topic. And I want to thank you all for joining us this evening so we can learn more about preparing for college if you have a student with an IEP or 504 plan or that is enrolled at a special education, independent special education school. This is the second webinar, as I said, that we've done on this topic. If you'd like to revisit last year's, you can visit our website where it lives there in perpetuity. We're really, really pleased to have this diverse and knowledgeable panel because we're going to talk about a few different topics this evening. But I'm going to start off with this one because it's something that I hear a lot, I see a lot, I get questions about it a lot. Do IEPs or 504 plans follow a student to college? Marion, why don't you kick us off with that one?
Sure. Thank you so much. And thank you for having me, Christine. I'm honored to be here. And that is a significant misconception. IEPs do not follow a student to college. The entire landscape changes for the student's eligibility for services. So once a student graduates from high school, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, that is the law that mandates a school district, a public school district, to provide a free, appropriate public education. That is no longer in effect. It is no longer in effect for colleges, and colleges do not have to comply with that. So the law protecting students in college is Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, which is a very different law with very different standards. So remember, under IDEA, as you know, many of you know, school districts do have the affirmative obligation to locate, identify, evaluate students with disabilities, and then develop an IEP, and then ensure that the students receive the services and that the IEP is implemented and that the student makes appropriate progress. That is no longer true in college. There is not monitoring. There is not an affirmative obligation. College is not an entitlement or a right. It's just a very different standard. So the burden is going to be on the student under 504 to show that they have a documented disability, physical or mental impairment that substantially limits a major life activity. And they would have to disclose that to the Office of Disability Services, and they have to seek out the services themselves. So it's a very, very different standard. And there's no matter what you say, colleges do not have the obligation to follow an IEP. Although you can certainly provide the IEP to inform the college as documentation of a student's disability.
Perfect. Thank you. Danielle, would you like to add anything to that?
Yeah, so I have found that some districts will do different process in the exit component from the IEP versus the 504. Some families can add that documentation as they move on to support the student's case. But really a lot of the discussion with seniors is reaching out to that Office of Disability at their selected college, finding out what their process is, and then coming back to me or the person at their school to find out what documentation we can provide them to take.
And it really is it's a different process for every school. It really different colleges will have, just as different colleges will have different support frameworks for students, they also will have different requirements. They will, which will run the gamut from sending in a neuropsych that's sort of current to providing your learning plan or your or your IEP, or sometimes having a provider fill out a form. I've seen that as well. So it's really important, and we'll talk about this a little bit more. But I'm really glad that we've sort of cleared up that misconception, because I see it all the time, particularly in Facebook and social media, on parent groups where parents are talking about, their IEPs being followed in college, and that is just not the case. It is not sort of the law. I'm really excited, sort of to back up a little bit, for Danielle and Stephanie, for you both to, sort of weigh in on, going, we started out talking about, sort of transitioning to college, but, I want to back up because this webinar is intended for families who are preparing for their student to go to college. So their student is a freshman or a sophomore or even a junior. So, I mean, if you go back to like freshman year for a student that has, some documented learning disabilities, maybe they're enrolled at Winston, maybe they have a 504 plan at Harvey, maybe they have an IEP in their public school. What is the, what would you recommend that students and parents do at the beginning of that high school journey across the board? That's a broad question. I'm sorry, Steph, you want to go first?
Sure. And thank you for having me on, Christine.
Absolutely.
Join the panel here of these wonderful people. I think ninth grade is a transition year in itself, transitioning from middle school to being a high school student. So I kind of help parents focus just on that transition, to be honest, because that's a very big leap. And with maturation, really, students need to kind of feel settled into those demands within a high school, expectations. And I think the focus for me, for parents, is to really think about those skills that are not, that are going to continue that trajectory of success when we get to those 11th and 12th grade years, and we really start to look at what schools, make sense for that student in terms of their wants and their needs, and to make sure that we keep them on that track of success. It's really important to make the right choice. There's that getting into college, and then there's that being able to stay in college and be successful,
right,
and continue on that path. So I think working towards awareness of the skills that are needed for success.
Mm-hmm.
Sure, they need to have the academic skills to be successful, but They need the planning and the organizational skills. They need the self-reflection.
Mhm.
They need to be able to understand themselves as learners. They need to problem solve more independently. They
Mhm.
need to self-advocate more independently.
Accept criticism,
Accept
accept
criticism,
feedback.
responsive feedback, not
Mhm.
just ignore the feedback and move on. It's fine. It's good enough, right? So that takes lots of time. So starting in 9th grade, and we work with students even in middle school, and I know Harvey too. So it starts early, and it just every year you have another level of independence and expectation for those students, depending on their profile as well. But that's the message that we like to emphasize.
Danielle?
I would say, sort of piggybacking off of Stephanie, all of those things, plus in my department, really concentrating on just keeping paperwork current, making sure sort of the logistics around learning plans are where they need to be, how we're sharing information with students that then empowers them to be able to go and advocate for themselves and hear that feedback from their teachers and understand where they fall within the scope of those pieces as well. And conversations with families around, if your public district is offering you an IEP, keep it current. If you need a neuropsych, let's talk about how old they should be when you get the neuropsych.
Mhm.
College Board ACT testing, right? So those logistics play in also.
That's great. Actually, you brought that up, so I want to segue right into, the College Board and SAT and testing, which seems like it's early because we're just talking about 9th graders, but it really isn't. So, maybe if you could explain why it's not early, number one, and number two, why you would still try to get accommodations through the College Board, even if you are planning on not submitting test scores to a particular college.
Sure. So College Board students are covered with accommodations for PSAT, SAT, or future AP courses.
Mhm.
So completing a request with College Board towards the end of the 9th grade year is helpful, because then they take the PSAT in October in 10th grade. They're sort of set up for what their accommodations would look like,
Mhm.
and really simulate the testing situation for them, which for many of our students, I think globally, it's haven't sat through that long, arduous test.
Sure, absolutely.
So it replicates that for them. And that is why we recommend it at the end of 9th grade.
Mhm.
Um,
You
and
mentioned the AP
yes,
classes as well, which is like something I find a lot of parents don't realize is they're like, well, my kid is going to is not going to take, the SAT, not going to submit scores. I don't need to do, any of that stuff. And actually, if your child is taking AP classes, then, all that the College Board, accommodations, they matter, right?
they do. You would need them for the AP exam. So it's something I think we take, because you can submit the request to College Board and keeps the documentation, so the student has that set up for them as they explore their options through high school, coursework wise, plus entrance exam. And even if a student isn't planning to take an SAT, I know some of our college folks recommend possibly sitting for one of the standardized tests, because you might come across a school that you really, really like, that seems to be a good fit, that wants a score. So
Mhm.
you want to have something in your back pocket, so to
In your back
speak.
pocket for that. Absolutely. We, there's, you mentioned, you sort of touched on course selection and we were touching on it with, the AP, the AP classes. If Stephanie, can you and Danielle and Marion, of course, chime in as well. Can you talk a little bit about, course selection throughout high school and how you would advise students that, have some learning challenges or difficulties, how they should think about, what classes to take, freshman, sophomore, junior, and senior year,
Mhm.
if college is the end game.
You want me or Stephanie to go?
Whoever wants to go. Stephanie, maybe. Let's
Okay.
go with you.
Well, at Winston Prep, it's a little different because our
Yeah.
courses are kind of like pre-scheduled in many ways.
Mhm.
So there's not that much conversation about course selection, but we're always mindful of transcripts and making sure that students have their transcripts and they're checking off the boxes for what schools are looking for in terms of having the right amount of sciences, having the right math coursework, and this, in STEM classes or in history or liberal arts classes. And we're making sure to offer a variety of that for students. So
Mhm.
it is important that you don't want something like that to kind of hold you back from a school if you haven't taken the right math
Yeah.
levels and things like that.
Yeah.
So thinking ahead is important to keep track of that for sure.
Mhm. And language requirements also can be a factor for some schools. Although, I feel like it's if your school doesn't offer language, it's sometimes it's possible to to get a waiver on that. Or Marion, if you want to chime in and just tell me I'm making this up, but I feel like that that might be something, because a lot of schools that are supporting students with with learning disabilities aren't making foreign language a requirement, just given, sometimes we have, challenges with our own language, and with processing our own language. So, love to hear your thoughts on that.
Sure. Yes, I think, I mean, under the IEP process, students can be exempt from a foreign language, but that may not be the best decision for a college-bound student, because some colleges will want a foreign language. But there are options. There's American Sign Language, for example,
Yes.
could be a
Mhm.
good option. And I just want to backtrack a minute on the courses taken, because this is only applicable to students in New York. But it's important that just a very basic thing, make sure your student is on a diploma track. And
Right.
many parents don't know about this, but in New York, not in Connecticut, if you are on alternate assessments in a public school, a student will not get a diploma and will not be able to go to college. And I've had people come to me even as late as middle school to say, why is this curriculum so much different? I don't understand. And they're on alternate assessments and don't
Mhm.
even know. New
Mhm.
York State has a plan to change that. It's called a blueprint, that they're looking to make this more equitable and
Mhm.
to respect diverse learning styles.
Mhm.
But just make sure, if you're in New York in a public school, or even make sure your private school does offer a
A
diploma.
diploma track.
I know that Harvey does, and I know that Fusion does, and Inspire does. But some of the private special education schools do not offer diplomas. So that is a very basic
Mhm.
credential your student will need to get into college. So
Right. No, that's a great point. And it's really helpful for you to point out that, that process, that decision, as it were, that, that kind of, fork in the road may have happened, in middle school before, even before high school. So it's important to understand, exactly what what path, what track your student is on, as you're moving through the process. Marion, could you, continue on, and, we're sort of talking about the beginning of, of high school, and, and that being a transition year. Are there, as you think about students that are college bound, that are, motivated and looking to, to reach a post-secondary education, level, are there specific accommodations, supports that you recommend for, for students in high school to set them up for success at the college level?
it's not so much accommodations and supports as much as the goals, I think. And I think Danielle hit on it, where that goal of self-advocacy and those metacognitive skills, starting as early as possible when a student is not too, if you have a very fragile student with emotional disability, it may be too soon. But eventually, when a student turns 18 and goes to college, they are in the driver's seat.
Mhm.
They do control whether parents receive records. They do their own advocacy. They are responsible for their own lives. Parents are not part of the process. Parents have actually almost no rights in
Right.
the college advocacy
You have
process.
a
So
right to pay the bill.
you have the
That's been
right
my
to pay
experience,
tuition.
but
Exactly.
very little else, very
There's
little
no
else coming your
monitoring.
way. Yeah.
The college will not tell you if the student is not going to class.
Yep.
So those skills of self-advocacy, if the student is able, going to those meetings, going to those IEP meetings, because student can learn this is not happening by accident. A lot of people are really working on what's around me. It's not invisible. And because the students I have seen with significant disabilities and significant mental health conditions are the ones who are able to go up to their professor and say, for example, just one example, a student with a mental health condition, "Hey, I have accommodations. I have provided documentation. I have major depression. I may not be in class every day because I have depression and anxiety. However, I am keeping up with the work and I'm not lazy. I'm just have a disability. It's chronic, and that's amazing to be able to do that. It's
Yeah.
very, very hard. I think very few students can do that.
Yeah.
But to be able to work to that point is our goal.
Requires
So
practice, absolutely. And you can start that in the, in the beginning, middle, and end of high school, by involving students in their, in the process, and not just kind of, even though obviously, we want to do this because, you're going to do it better and faster than they are, but letting them be part of the process, and and so they can learn to advocate for themselves. And I will agree with you. I mean, obviously the accommodations process differs at every university, but the ones that I've observed will once you make it through the accommodations process and you are approved for those accommodations, the school will notify the professor that you have accommodations for their specific class, but it's up to the student to assert their to assert those rights, basically. So like the professor might have a list, but they're not going to reach out to the student and say, hey, I heard that you have accommodations, and what can I do to make your life easier? Like, that's not going to be the way it works. So you're
No.
absolutely right. Starting that that process early, and and making students responsible and engaged and part of the process is really a crucial step.
And it's very hard to do. I mean, the student, that example I gave is maybe less than 5%, because
Yeah.
most students, if they're overwhelmed, are going to just kind of the instinct is to just
Cut
curl
down.
up,
Yeah.
not go to class, and then by the semester will be over very quickly, and
Yeah.
because they haven't been in
Nobody
class.
tells you if they're going to class.
No,
No
exactly.
one
So
tells
that
you if they're
is,
going to class.
yeah,
So they have to
yeah.
have that, sort of, that ingrained in them before they leave your house, pretty much. Because even if you have them on Life 360, as I do, and I can tell when they leave their dorm room, you really can't force them to do anything, and the college isn't going to help you. I wanted to kind of explore, you know, through the high school process, um, and we've talked a little bit about, about testing. We've talked about course selection. How else do you prepare students, all three of you, how else do you prepare students for that next step, for the, for college, and the, and being successful at college?
Yeah. So I think at Harvey, one of the things that we really work hard on is understanding that ninth grade is a transition year. We have a ninth and 10th grade dean who sort of welcomes the students in. I think we're very thoughtful around tapering the supports gradually as they lean towards graduation,
Mhm.
and really encouraging students that you should be reaching out to your teacher, and we need you to answer emails, and we need you to kind of go in and meet with and ask specific questions. Come to meetings with your teachers with questions. Annotate a problem so that they understand where you got it wrong or where you went off track. Kind of leading them through that through the 4 years, and really hoping right at the end they're ready to fly and go off. And obviously there's hurdles along the way, and we're dealing with adolescence, but really prompting them as they go through the grades to pull back a little bit, while also having given them the supports to move forward independently.
Perfect. Steph?
Yeah, I would just add to that also being able to recognize their learning profile.
Mhm.
I think that's really important in terms of, what hasn't helped me be successful, what kind of supports would be important for me to be successful in college.
Mhm.
Do I need a small environment? Can I handle a larger environment? What roommate situation is going to work for me?
Mhm.
How about my social life, right? Am I going to have trouble there? What do I need to do to be active and to reach out and go to the club, go and find clubs that really speak to
Meet my
me
interest. Yeah.
and think about that piece, because if, that's such an important part of their success is feeling connected
Mhm.
once they're there, and to avoid, some, especially with the mental health challenges that they're facing in high school, it could be exacerbated in college. So being very thoughtful about that, and then in order to make those decisions for what is going to be the next setting that works for them, and then to continue the success.
Mary?
I would agree with both of you, both Danielle and Stephanie, and recognizing that learning profile, also recognizing their emotional profile, recognizing when they are shutting down. How are they going to communicate that, to a parent or to a trusted adult, because that is key, and it doesn't happen often enough. And the college, again, is not going to be monitoring.
Mhm.
So it's important to develop, especially, not all students, have mental health challenges going into college, but
Mhm.
some develop them. And it's just important to prepare students for if that happens, because, I mean, this is a hard topic, but unfortunately, the suicide rate in college is much higher than it should be. And we have to, what is the student going to do? How are they going to reach out to get help?
Mhm.
What are the signs everyone's going to look for that they can reach out? Also developing, it's essential to have the parents as part of this process. Although they're not legally entitled to it, the student can agree to include them. So developing that trust relationship with the parents to know that they have to be part of the process. You have to get the form signed, the HIPAA consent, the FERPA consent, the power of attorney, because the parents are in your corner. They are 100%, they are in the back seat, but they are your support. And so the students, to develop that trust and develop some kind of a partnership that will work. What is the communication going to be? Or what if the parents don't hear after sending 5 texts? When should they ask for a
Right.
wellness check?
Right.
There's all these, I think developing that plan and understanding sort of some education on mental health conditions, even if the student doesn't have them at that point, they can develop.
Mhm.
And also just having that partnership and safety plan for everybody.
Yeah, and if I could add to that too, I think a conversation that we have with our families and students is also kind of what are their life skills like? Like, how independent are they? Are they doing their laundry? Have they spent time away from home? I mean, a lot of our students are very attached to their families, and their family units are so
Tight.
bonded
Yeah. Mhm.
that spending time away from home is hard for some students. Some
Yeah.
some are going to sleepaway camp and it's not a
Yeah.
problem, but others it's like, nope, don't do that.
Yeah.
And so we encourage families by junior year to take advantage of some college enrichment programs that are
Mhm.
available, that are wonderful, that give students about like 2 weeks to be in a dorm
Experience.
and
Yeah.
live
Mhm.
there and have some sort of academic work and get their feet wet a little bit. And we
Yeah.
find that students come back really, really excited about the process and
Mhm.
feel more confident, and then they really can blossom further. So it's important to provide those experiences for students.
And it's also, I mean, it's a very overwhelming process, but, I'm, being a parent in the middle of it, as I said to my oldest before he left for college, and everybody was, very, like very emotional about the whole thing, and, emotive. And I said, really, it's just, a year of college is just a series of sleepaway camps. It's like there's 6 weeks in your home, and then there's 4 weeks, and then you're home, and then you're like home again, and then you're home again. I mean, it's, so it really is just these like chunks of time, which, are roughly analogous to like a 6-week sleepaway camp, a 4-week sleepaway camp. So it's not as long, as it seems. It's like you can do that, that BCBA chunking thing and talk about that, how it's just those those groups of weeks that you're away. But that's really helpful. Thank you. I was wondering if, we're talking a lot about college. Obviously, this is a webinar about preparing for college, but how do I think, this specifically for Stephanie, because, you do have students that, that will take a transition year or gap year, or maybe not go to college at all. And Marion, in your practice, how do you decide, as a family, whether college is the right choice for you, for your student. How do you go through that thought process?
Yeah. We talk to our families about, there's really such a wide variety of options for students out
Mhm.
there.
Yeah.
And and for different profiles too. So, you know, we kind of break it into like 3 parts, right? So there's more of a like living experience and independent skills type of track. And then there's supportive colleges and programs that maybe in the early tier, it's maybe a mix of life skills and college living. And then there's maybe 2-year colleges that are supportive, but then there's also 4-year schools with really good learning support programs, right? That you have to kind of apply to separately from the school that are excellent. That really mimics much of the support they've gotten already from Winston Prep. And then there's just really nurturing schools that don't have that support as like structured,
Built into
and
this.
you're not
Yeah.
going to
Yeah.
see a specialist, 3 times a week, but our students thrive there, right? They're smaller. The professors really know the students, and
The
those
professors are accepting of neurodiversity as an
right,
idea.
exactly. And then there's the more traditional 4-year schools that have, every college has to have some kind of well, they all can provide accommodations, but there's usually some peer tutoring available, and it
Yeah.
can really range in what you're getting. So really
Yeah.
looking at the fine print there of what can you get and the quality of what you're getting is an important process. So there's lots of direction and investigation that we help guide our students and our families through, and figuring out what makes sense. And we'll have students who in their senior year, they have all their, acceptances and are not sure, do I want this, and they're visiting the acceptance day school, acceptance days, and going 3 times to visit and feeling it out and figuring it out. And it's a big decision, but there's a lot of options, which is wonderful because our families need to
a lot of options. Yeah. Not
plan
everybody's
out
ready
a
to
few
go.
options,
Yeah.
because in a couple of years they change so much, right?
Yeah.
The
No, that is
conversation
true.
junior year, by the time they're senior, we see our kids change so much. So,
Yeah.
What's the answer going to be in April of senior year?
No, it's definitely true. Marion?
Yes, I agree. And I think the decision to some degree does have to be student led. This is their decision. However, it does have to be supported by parents, and it's a significant financial.
Oh, Marion, you're muted. Oh, there you go.
Was I muted? There we go. So it's a very significant financial endeavor. So it has to be a partnership. But I think, college doesn't have to be for everybody. And, college is not typically 4 years anymore. Just keep that in mind. Parents, that's a significant misconception, because most students who enter college say they're going to graduate in 4 years, 90%, but only between 41 to 45 graduate in 4 years. And even in 6 years, only 66% do. So this just shows you that colleges are not guaranteeing any result, and they don't have to under the law. So if you're considering supporting your child to go to college, just make sure you're financially able to handle this. Make sure you get tuition insurance before the year starts. If the college offers it, if the college doesn't offer it, you can get it from a private entity. And there are a lot of caveats, like every type of insurance, but it really does kick in. For example, if your child mid-year decides, either for any reason, it could be
a health reason. A health reason is very, very common.
Could be a concussion, it could be a skiing accident, it could be major depression. And by giving the documentation and you withdraw, the parents will get most of that money back. And so I'm kind of diverting, but I think that's really important when you're making that decision. But I think there's so many paths a person can take, and we kind of underrate vocational work sometimes, but we know that's a really good path too. And some students may need an extra year to prepare. So I would let the student initially take the lead, but make sure that their goals are what we say, specific,
Measurable, achievable, and
achievable.
then the R in
Yeah,
I don't remember.
And time, yeah, that they should
Yeah.
have to be realistic and that they can be financially supported, because some of the colleges now are $100,000 a year
Yeah.
in total,
No,
so
that's
just
true.
keep that in mind.
No, it's a significant commitment. We've kind of moved, I'm sorry, Danielle, go ahead.
I was saying, I want to loop that back to course selection.
Yes, that's
I
right.
think
That's
when
actually a
we're-
good segue. Absolutely.
I think that when we're thinking about who they are and what they're looking for, obviously it's going to change moment to moment sometimes. but having the opportunity to discuss with them and having them advocate for possibly an honors class, that's a stretch.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
understanding why, or is that a passion area? Is that something you want to go into, right?
Mhm.
Or are you just doing that because you feel this obligation to have an honors class
Right.
where it might not actually have the effect that you're looking for when you're thinking GPA transcript?
Especially if
right?
you hate it and you aren't doing well as a result.
I find sometimes with the ninth graders having discussions for course selection for 10th grade is, well, I need that because I need this GPA and I need, and it's really pulling back with them and having
Yeah.
a conversation around, but realistically, if you're not interested in it.
Yeah.
So thinking where we can stretch and feel a little bit of discomfort sometimes with the academic rigor,
Mhm.
and where maybe we don't need to stretch a student so much. So, but it gives them the opportunity to kind of have to go to self-advocate, have to kind of understand their learning profile.
Yeah. And balancing that is always good.
Yes.
Balancing, like I'm stretching here, but this is a more comfortable, learning environment for me in this particular class is always helpful, because you can't just always, take the things that you like, obviously,
Right.
all the time. Sometimes you're going to have to take things that that you don't want to take, which is true in college as well. We've kind of moved into this area, or to this area of discussion, and I'd be really interested to hear your thoughts on, and I recognize that none of you are educational consultants. I'm going to throw that, or really college guidance counselors, even if you do sort of act like that in your spare time. But all of you have broad experience with students that have differing learning styles and needs. How would you counsel parents to go about the process of finding a college or university that provides the support that your student needs?
I think being realistic about what your student needs is probably the first step, right?
Mhm.
Really, really doing some soul searching there around what is it that they really need? What is
Yeah.
their interest area? Where are they? And then sort of devising from that and reaching out and asking questions.
Mhm.
Yeah, I would agree with that for sure. While also kind of keeping intact some dreams as well, because it's really up to the family's decision. So,
Mhm.
it's providing the options and talking about the differences each of those programs might provide.
Mhm.
And then encouraging them to really go and see these schools and talk to
Very important. Yeah.
the learning support specialists there,
Mhm.
if there are any, or the accommodations or the professors in the department that they want to study in.
Mhm.
And then talk to students also on the campus and even have the visiting day and stay
Yeah.
over. I think it's really important that they really know what they're getting into and
Mhm.
what it's going to be like.
Yeah. And I would just add to that, I would just be careful, because there's different supportive colleges. And I think there's some colleges that gear themselves specifically for students with learning differences. And they will integrate supports, and it should be part of their contract or part of what you're signing up for. Most colleges do not do that.
Mhm.
And even if they're very supportive, they have no legal obligation to
Yeah.
ensure anything.
Yeah.
So just keep in mind, no matter how supportive they are, these small supportive schools, they have a lot of services you can access. They have learning centers, they have writing centers, math centers, oxygen bars, therapy dogs,
peer support, other
wellness
support.
center.
Yeah.
But that's all up to the student to access. If the student doesn't access it, they will not reach out and say, oh, by the way, you missed your count. They will send you a note if you miss counseling, but they will not remind you in advance or here. It's up to so that can be, it can be almost a mirage in some way. So just be careful. So
Yeah.
that's where you kind of have to make sure your student is ready in a way, or accept that they may not, the first year they may fail.
Yeah.
That is the reality of this, or not even fail, just not be able to access it and need more time. I wouldn't view it as failing, but there are everybody. I think we have, especially with COVID, we've had a really tough time for college students, and the colleges do recognize that, but they have certain requirements they have to meet for that. They are very set on their academic rigor. A lot of them,
Yeah.
even the more supportive ones, and they will not, even if you have accommodations and modifications, they're often very limited.
Yeah.
And they will not substantially alter the program.
Mhm.
So just keep that in mind, and the student has to keep that in mind. That's where those course selections and taking more rigorous courses are important. But you're still not really prepared until you get there for the level of rigor, the lack of monitoring, and
Right. And the independence,
the independence.
the
Yes.
independence, for sure.
Yeah.
Stephanie, I liked your comment, before, which wasn't an answer to this, but, was sort of, answers it anyway, is, that there are these programs that are, there's programs within a university that provide support that you have to apply into. Then there's the idea of a school with, that is supportive, in nature by its size and its, and its vibe, more or less, and that has the support staff, but it's not embedded into a program for the student, so I think that that's a really interesting thing to to consider, as you're looking at at different schools. I always think about like what is going to make a student like successful, obviously academically, in their life skills, in their, sort of living independently and socially, because all those three of those things are crucial if you are going to, to be successful in, in a college environment. So like it's absolutely vital to, to look at, a school. I mean, I do a thing when with my kids, when I went to look at colleges where, I always want to know what percentage of the student body plays sports. Because I have one student that plays sports and another student that hates them, so I'm looking for different answers for my different child. But that, to me, it's like, if you're telling me that 50% of your students are playing a varsity sport, that is something that's going to be very dominant in the culture of the school. Whereas if you're telling me 50% of your students are musicians, that's a different, kind of feel. So there's things like that that aren't, that can tell you about the culture of a school and whether your child will be happy there, that aren't like kind of, brochure type questions.
Yeah. I've started the college search process with my oldest now too.
Oh,
So,
fun.
and now I can speak to that. And yes, he knows he wants to be in a city,
Mm-hmm.
which most of my students don't want to. So
Yeah.
I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
I adjust. I thought I had
Yeah.
this. And then he's looking at the style, and
Yeah.
he's not so artsy, but he's attracted to the artsy
Yeah.
kind of people. So
Artsy kind of people. So that's like,
Right.
that's kind of the vibe that you want
right. So
that
he's
you're,
like, okay, I think there's not
yep.
enough of those people here, Mom. I'm like, I
Yep.
think you're right. I think
Yep.
I love the school, but I don't know
Love
if
the
they'll be
school.
feeling
Seems a
here,
little
right?
sporty for me, like,
Yeah.
I'm gonna give it a pass. How do you, really work with your students, on this, kind of, because, it's, and I promised that we weren't going to talk about like applications, and we're not going to talk about applications because that's a totally different subject. But, when you're a student that's looking for a college with support, and you're applying to that college, you want to be, a round peg in the round hole. But, how do you approach that in the application process? Do you disclose your disability to, the school as part of your application, or do you not disclose? How do you think about that?
I mean, as a Winston Prep is a
Right.
independent school, so we do share a profile
Right.
about exactly who we are
Mhm.
and what our program is. So our families are very comfortable disclosing, and we've never had any issues
Mhm.
with that getting in a way of a student's acceptance. So,
Mhm.
I haven't seen that be a problem, and I think, I think you can gain a lot from being very upfront and transparent in terms
Right.
of your needs and what the program can offer, because you can't, that's gonna be the reality if you go into that school. So
Absolutely. And I'm a big believer in that as well. Danielle?
I think that it's mixed in our college office. I can't speak for sort of who discloses and the ratios and the percentages there, but I think that is an active discussion with each family as to what they want to disclose and where they're applying.
Right.
I would agree. It's very individualized, because it's not typical. It's sort of the more, if you're looking at a very competitive college, and you can apply later for accommodations, but you don't know if there's going to be discrimination, and they can't discriminate. But how do you can't prove
How do
it
you
if
tell?
they do?
How do you
Yeah,
tell?
how do you tell? So I think it's very individualized, and you can always disclose after acceptance, but it's because, and just because if you disclose before, it doesn't increase their obligation. It just means it's more likely to be a good fit. That's the difference. But I think it's really very individualized.
I actually agree with that. I mean, I'm very much on the topic, I'm very much a believer in, in a square peg for a square, hole. And if, any university, should know that about my student, because it helps, it helps in the success. So let's talk about that process. You've identified, the perfect school, you've been accepted to the school. How do you, walk through the support, walk me through the supports process at, at your university, the spring of your senior year?
So I encourage students, if they come, well, first, sometimes the parents will email me and I'll say, have your student come and see me,
Yep.
starting that advocating and being
Yep.
able to sort of speak for what they need piece.
Mhm.
And then I try and walk with the student of, you need to reach out to the Office of Disabilities at the school that you're planning to attend. You need to find out what they want. What are they looking for? What documentation do you need? After you've done that and had that discussion with them, then let's come back together and see what I have on the school end to offer you. And then, we can sort of pull from there and see what we need. But really, I push back to them, to the student, to go do the work a little bit on their own, to be able to articulate what they need, why they need it,
Yeah.
what they've had, why they have it,
Right.
because those are going to be important pieces.
Yeah. And the college really doesn't want to hear from the parent, like, let's be honest, they do not want they don't want anything to do. Well, and a lot of them, I mean, I've found that, at least the colleges that I've had personal experience with, they will, speak to you, but it's really a courtesy, it's not a requirement. And, and they ultimately, they want to have that dialogue with the student, because the student is going to be the one that's on campus, actually, advocating for themselves. Stephanie?
I'm really much the same answer as
Yeah.
Danielle. It's really time for the student to really
Step
be
in,
the
yeah.
agent here. And, we support and encourage, but they're the person who needs to reach out and share and have the questions and, review how it went and what the follow-up might be.
No, I agree. And I completely agree. It's the student who should be taking the initiative. One thing the parents can do before this point is, though, to as part of the evaluation process, the colleges may want an adult WISC, the Westler Intelligence Scale,
Right.
16 and older, to document certainly any learning disabilities. So just keep that in mind. The student won't know that, so the parent can assist with that while they're still in high school, just to make sure that's done after 16.
That's a
And
little
then
tough. It's a little tough because, you're like, we need a current neuropsych, or a current evaluation, but you don't necessarily know what school you're going to go to until, sort of your senior year, or what school you're sort of looking at. And some of them have different testing that they're looking at. And then it's like, then you get to, your spring of senior year, and it's hard to get a, evaluation in the, in the amount of time, they're like, you need an evaluation to be done in, within a, like, it needs to be current, it needs to be within 1 year. and you're like, that's great. There's like a 7-month waiting list and we're in April of, senior year. What do I do then? And I would just observe that I feel like schools are, colleges and universities are, cognizant of that and, and will try to help you, through that process. I mean, obviously they're not going to take a neuropsych from when, your child was 11, but, within the last couple of years, I feel like,
Yeah.
most schools are willing to work with you.
Yeah, I think it doesn't have to be a neuropsych. It can
right.
be a school district evaluation, just the
Mhm.
WISC. The school districts will say that they will kind of push back, but you should ask for that evaluation from a
Mhm.
public school district. If you have an IEP, your child has an IEP as part of your transition. So I've done that. We pushed for it, and it, as I said, it can be a school district evaluation, the WISC and the WIAT, and a few other subtests. But
Yeah.
that can be just as effective, especially if they've had a neuropsych in the past. It doesn't have to be a full.
Yeah.
Um,
And
formal
Marion,
education.
just to wrap up as we're coming up on 8 o'clock, can you walk through some of the accommodations we've been saying, accommodations in college, can you talk a little bit about some specific accommodations in college, aside from, academic, obviously, touch on academic, but what else is available, in terms of housing and terms of, student living, student life, I mean, I think a lot of parents aren't familiar with some of those options that are
Yeah,
possible.
so the you can speak to the college about requesting whatever you want. Some of them limit to only extended time. So it's really, but you could ask for just some adjustments such as
Mhm.
priority course registration, reducing a course load possibly, substituting a course for another, providing a note taker. The college will not give you a note taker, but they may let someone come in, necessarily allowing recording devices. That's has to be an accommodation. You can't just bring it in. Possibly a sign language interpreter,
Mhm.
extended time for testing. I mentioned possibly there could be a way to communicate in dorm rooms. Certainly, if
Mhm.
there's hearing impairment or visual impairment, there are other accommodations you could definitely ask for.
Mhm.
Equipping school computers with screen reading, voice recognition, other adaptive software, hardware. So those are some of them. It's just it's better to request those. And a student's going to have to request it each semester. You have to ask for those accommodations each semester in most colleges. It's not enough at the beginning. They don't hold on
Mhm.
to it. So you can, if things change, you should let the college know. And it's better you need to do that before, because if you're at the point of failing your courses, it's very hard then to ask for them.
Right. Right.
And it's very hard to get attendance modifications. That's one thing to ask for. I mentioned the one student with depression, but
Right.
some courses have attendance as a requirement. So that may be
Mhm.
hard to
Alternate testing center, always,
alternate
could
testing. So
be
yeah,
alternate
it's
center site.
there aren't as many available, not nearly the amount, and they're going to be very careful. That's not going to be changing their standards.
Yeah.
So those are just
Sure.
some of them. Counseling is going to be, it's not going to be an accommodation. It's going to be up to the student to access, just keep that in mind.
What about in terms of housing and, and housing in student life? I mean, requesting a single, requesting, sort of, first floor of a dormitory, things like that.
Yes, you can certainly request that, especially if it's mobility, they would do first floor. I think
Mhm.
it depends on requesting a single may not be possible. It just was going to depend, on
Yeah.
on the college and what's
Yeah.
available.
Yeah.
But the colleges, they do try to do that anyway to give you either a single or a roommate who's compatible. So
Yeah.
I think
Everybody wants you
one.
to succeed for sure.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So you could be creative and think of things. I mean, you could ask for an accommodation that the school would notify you as a parent, if the student
Mhm.
consented that they were in class. Not all colleges will do that, but you can ask for, or the student can ask for things. They may not get them all. It's going to
Yeah.
depend a lot on the college.
On
Some
the
of the colleges
college. Yeah,
say
absolutely.
no, just extended time, or maybe like you said, separate location, or but and then it's, the student can ask for some accommodations as they go along. Oh, I was ill, just if you were ill, for example, and need extended time for a paper. I think a lot of this is going
Right.
to be up to the professor. And
Right.
a lot of this, as you said, is up to the professor individually too.
Yeah. And that's an important thing to remember as you get into the college,
Mhm.
into the college system, is that the professors you know, are going to vary class to class as to how supportive and open they are to, you know, this the whole thing. You know, some will be very open and very accepting and very reasonable about, you know, accommodations, and others will be less so, and that is true at every college and university. You know, if you are you know, it is true at every college or university. My son, when he went to his first you know, office accommodations meeting, we're at the end of the meeting, and the college rep she's like, so do you want an emotional support animal? And you know, and it was like, had never occurred to, you know, to us that that would be and you know, and God bless him, he knows himself pretty well, and he's like, I don't think I'm gonna work on keeping myself together. I don't think I can expand that to another animal, and keeping that alive. So on that note, I want to thank everyone for joining us this evening for this incredibly insightful view into you know, how to get ready for you know, for college, how to prepare when your child has a learning challenge, an IEP of 504, or is enrolled at a special education school. I thank you so much, Marian, Danielle, and Stephanie, for joining us. Those of you who are still on the call, we our next webinar, evening webinar, is on May 15th on the topic of bullying, special education, and the law. Please join us then, and thank you so much to everyone. Have a great night.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having us.
Thank
Have a
you.
nice